All right, so are you ready to, like, really get into this whole Matt Gaetz thing?
Oh, yeah, I've been following this for a while now.
Well, good, because we finally got that ethics report everyone's been talking about.
Took them long enough, right?
Yeah, and let me tell you, well, it's packed with some pretty wild accusations.
Oh, I bet. So, like, what's the worst of it?
I mean, we're talking allegations of him paying women for, well,
Okay, yeah.
drug use too,
Mm-hmm.
and even accusations of a relationship with a minor.
Wow.
It's some serious stuff.
This isn't just some, like, gossipy tabloid stuff.
Right.
This gets to the heart of politics, what's considered acceptable, how power dynamics work, and how parties respond to these kinds of controversies.
Right. So before we dive into the specifics of the report,
Yeah,
let's rewind a bit for people who may not remember all the details.
good idea.
You might remember Matt Gaetz as this up-and-coming guy in the House.
Rising star, some people are saying?
Yeah, but then things got messy. Rumors started swirling about his behavior. Wild parties, drug use, inappropriate relationships with young women. Even some House members were saying Gaetz was showing them photos of these women right there on the House floor.
It's crazy how this was all happening before any formal investigation even began, almost like a political thriller unfolding in real time.
Right, and then the House Ethics Committee finally launches their investigation.
Which leads us to this bombshell report.
Exactly, and get this, the timing of its release. Well, it dropped right when Gaetz was briefly nominated for Attorney General by Trump.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He actually stepped down from the House almost immediately after being nominated.
Yeah, and then just a few days later, withdrew his name from consideration for AG. It all seems so sudden.
Looking back now, it makes you wonder if those decisions were made out of panic.
Totally. And remember, Gaetz really tried to bury this report. He filed lawsuits to stop its release.
It's like he knew how damaging it would be.
Right. When it became clear the report was coming out, no matter what, he tried to get ahead of it by tweeting about his past.
That embarrassing but supposedly non-criminal past, right?
Exactly. He basically admitted to partying, drug use, and womanizing in his 30s.
And let's not forget about those payments to women.
Oh, yeah, he claimed he just gave money to anyone who asked. Sometimes those he dated, sometimes not.
Does that sound a little too convenient to you?
It definitely raises some questions. And here's where the ethics report throws a wrench into Gaetz' whole story.
Yeah, how so?
It directly contradicts his claims about those payments.
Oh, it's not good for him.
Okay, so let's get into the actual findings of this report. What did they actually uncover?
Right. Let's lay it all out.
First off, it's important to note this wasn't some partisan attack.
Right.
The committee that produced the report was bipartisan.
So both Democrats and Republicans were involved.
Yeah, and what they found is pretty shocking.
Like what? Spill the tea.
Well, they found substantial evidence that Gaetz had sex with a minor, engaged in pretty rampant drug use, including cocaine and ecstasy.
No way.
Yeah, and potentially broke multiple state laws while in office.
Yikes. That's a lot to unpack.
Oh, and they also revealed over $90,000 in payments to 12 different women between 2017 and 2020.
$90,000. That's a lot of money.
Right. And remember, he tried to play it off like he was just being generous.
Yeah, that's not looking so good now.
Not at all. And then there's the accusations of sex with a minor. What did the report say about that?
So there was testimony from a victim who stated that Gaetz had sex with her on 2 occasions when she was 17 years old.
And just to be clear, 17 is under the age of consent in most states.
Definitely. Which means this is a very serious allegation.
And to make matters worse, she also testified that she received $400 in cash from Gaetz, which she understood to be a payment for sex.
So that completely blows up his whole "I just give money to people" story.
Exactly. This paints a much darker picture of what was really going on with those payments.
Yeah, no kidding.
The report also details how Gaetz allegedly used a fake email address from his Capitol Hill office to buy marijuana.
Really?
Yeah. And he used code words like party favors, rolls, and even vitamins to refer to drugs.
It's like something out of a bad movie.
I know, right? But here's the thing.
What's that?
The report also stated that they didn't find enough evidence to support federal sex trafficking charges.
Huh. So despite all these findings, they couldn't nail him on that.
Right. Which leaves us with a lot to unpack.
Okay, so where do we even begin?
Well, first, how did Gaetz react to this whole thing?
Right, like what was his response?
Well, as we said, he first tried to block the report completely,
Yeah, and when that failed, he went with those preemptive tweets.
admitting to some questionable choices, but denying any criminal activity.
Classic non-apology apology.
Right. And what about the Republican Party? How did they react to these serious accusations against one of their own?
Now that's where things get really interesting.
Do tell.
Okay, so the GOP's reaction, or lack thereof, has been quite revealing.
What do you mean?
We'll take Steve Bannon, for example.
Big name in conservative circles.
Exactly. At a recent event, he actually rallied support for Gaetz, even with this damning report hanging over his head.
You're kidding. What'd he say?
He basically told the crowd to disregard the ethics report and its findings.
Wow.
Urged them to stand by Gaetz, said, "We want Matt Gaetz back in the fight." Even suggested Gaetz should return to Congress and take the oath in January.
So they're completely ignoring the report's findings and sticking by him.
That's how it looks, and it raises some big questions about accountability within political parties.
Like, how much are they willing to overlook when it comes to their own members?
Right. Especially considering the GOP often presents itself as the party of family values.
Yeah, there's a pretty big disconnect there.
A disconnect that's hard to ignore. And this whole situation with Matt Gaetz is just one example of a much larger trend we're seeing in politics today.
You know, it's kind of crazy to think about the position this puts the Republican Party in.
Oh, yeah. It's a total mess for them.
Like, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Totally. On one hand, you've got this, incredibly damaging report outlining some seriously bad behavior.
And on the other, you have this intense loyalty to Matt Gaetz from a big chunk of the GOP base.
And that base is very vocal, very active. They're a force to be reckoned with, especially when it comes to primaries.
Exactly. So how do you, as a party, condemn these actions without alienating a huge part of your support?
It's a tightrope walk, for sure. And how they handled this whole thing is going to be very telling.
It makes you wonder about their whole family values thing, right?
Oh, yeah, big time.
Can you really claim to uphold those values while defending someone accused of this kind of stuff?
It's a tough sell, no doubt. And it speaks to a bigger problem with accountability, not just in the GOP, but across the board in politics.
Right. If a politician can get away with this kind of behavior, what message does that send?
It creates this idea that there are different rules for the powerful. And that's dangerous. It erodes public trust. It weakens our democracy.
It also makes you wonder, what would it actually take for a party to hold one of their own accountable?
That's the million-dollar question. And there's no easy answer. It depends on public pressure, media attention, the political climate.
And let's not forget about the impact of social media.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other beast.
It's become so powerful in shaping public opinion and driving the conversation.
For better or worse.
Right. We see how fast information and misinformation spreads online. It creates these echo chambers where people only see what reinforces their beliefs.
It makes it so hard to have nuanced conversations about complex issues.
Especially in a case like this where opinions are so divided.
Yeah, social media just throws fuel on the fire. Makes it even harder to find common ground.
It's a real challenge.
Yeah.
But it's one we got to face head on. We need to be smarter about how we consume information, especially online.
Totally. Be willing to question things, challenge our own biases, and actually talk to people we disagree with.
Have those tough conversations.
Yeah, exactly. It all comes back to critical thinking. We can't just blindly accept everything we see and hear.
Especially from politicians.
Especially from politicians. We gotta hold them accountable, no matter what party they belong to.
This Matt Gaetz case, it's a good reminder that power corrupts. And without accountability, things can go bad quickly.
It's a lesson we should never forget. We can't be complacent. We have to stay engaged, stay informed, and stay active if we want to protect our democracy.
So as this whole saga continues, what are some things our listeners should be watching for?
Well, first off, keep an eye out for any further legal action against Gaetz.
Even though there are no federal charges, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But state-level charges are still a possibility.
Okay. What about the political fallout?
Will the GOP keep standing by him, or will they eventually cave to the pressure?
Especially if his base starts to turn on him.
Exactly. Their response is going to be very telling. And of course, we need to pay attention to how this plays out in the court of public opinion.
Will there be enough outrage to force some accountability, or will it all just fade away?
That's the big question. But no matter what, this case has brought up some important issues. Issues we as a society need to address.
Issues of power accountability, the role of political parties in holding their members responsible.
Exactly. And these aren't just talking points. These are conversations we need to keep having.
Long after this Matt Gaetz story is out of the news.
Because this isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a bigger pattern.
A pattern that demands we stay engaged, informed, and active participants in our democracy.
It's not enough to just vote. We got to be informed citizens who ask tough questions and hold our leaders accountable.
We can't just sit back and expect someone else to fix it. We all have a role to play.
Absolutely. We need to demand better from our leaders, demand transparency, and refuse to accept anything less than ethical behavior.
And most importantly, we got to have those uncomfortable conversations.
Even when it's tough, even when it's awkward, we can't shy away from the hard truths.
It's the only way we can make progress.
Right? It's through open and honest dialogue that we can address these systemic issues and create a more just and fair society.
So true. This Matt Gaetz situation, it's a wake-up call, a reminder that we can't take our democracy for
We
granted.
got to fight for it every day.
It's a call to action to be more informed, more engaged, and more demanding of our leaders.
We need to set higher standards, hold them accountable.
And remember, the power ultimately belongs to us, the people.
We have the power to demand better. We just got to use it.
So as we kind of wrap up this whole deep dive into this Matt Gaetz ethics report,
Mm.
what really stands out to you? What's the biggest thing here?
I think for me, it's those broader questions this case brings up. It's not just about Matt Gaetz. It's
Mhm.
about the whole question of personal behavior and when does it cross the line into impacting your political power?
Yeah.
What standards should voters hold our elected officials to?
That's a big one, right? It's easy to get caught up in all the juicy details of a story like this. But yeah, this is about something much bigger.
It is. It's about the foundation of our democracy and, how we hold those in power accountable.
Totally.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier, it really highlights how important critical thinking is.
Oh, yeah.
We can't just take what we hear at face value. Got to look deeper, consider different perspectives, and come to our own conclusions.
Especially now when information is everywhere and it's hard to know what to trust.
Right. Like
Yeah.
you were saying, we got to be savvy with the information we consume.
Especially online.
We got to question things, challenge our own biases, and have those tough conversations even when they're uncomfortable.
Don't be afraid to ask those tough questions, too. What would it take for you to, lose faith in a politician you support? Or what does real accountability look like to you? Those are questions we all should be asking ourselves.
Not just about Matt Gaetz, but about all our elected officials.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in, party loyalty
Yeah.
or ideology. But at the end of the day, these are people making decisions that affect our lives. Exactly.
We got to hold them accountable no matter what party they're from.
Absolutely. This isn't about Democrats versus Republicans. This is
Yeah.
about good governance, transparency, ethical behavior. We got to demand better from our leaders.
And make it clear that anything less is not okay.
Right.
So as you know, we all keep following this story and others like it. Remember that critical thinking we talked about? Don't just take things at face value. Dig a little deeper. Ask questions.
And come to your own conclusions.
And, most importantly, stay engaged.
Yes.
Stay informed.
Uh-huh.
Stay involved in the process.
Whether it's voting, contacting your representatives, attending town halls, or just talking about these issues with people you know.
Right.
Your voice matters.
This Matt Gaetz case, it's easy to see it as just another political scandal,
Oh, yeah.
but it's more than that.
It is. It's a challenge to our democracy. It's a wake-up call.
For all of us to be more aware, more informed, more demanding of our leaders.
Remember, the power is with the people.
We just got to use it.
Use it wisely.
Well said. I think that's a great place to wrap up.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This has been really insightful. And to all our listeners out there, keep those questions coming and stay engaged. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a different topic. Until then, stay curious,